everybody. Chris Stegall here with MK Partners. I'm joined today by Matt Kaufman. Matt, thanks for hopping on another one of these.
Thanks for having me.
And today we are talking about integrations and a little change on the Salesforce side of things as far as named external credentials. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah, that's correct.
Close enough, maybe?
Yeah. I've built a lot of integrations over the years, and often when I'm building an integration, it's writing some code inside Salesforce to call out to another system, another cloud-based application, typically. And in the past, hopefully we would use a named credential to basically whitelist the URL or the endpoint of the other system. You can actually do it a couple of ways in the past. Let me see if I can find my Salesforce. Let's go to remote. So a long time ago, we used to do this thing called remote site settings. And you can see we probably still have a bunch in here. But you would basically just say, yeah, there's a website, and I want to let Salesforce talk to that website. And there was like not a lot of granular control over it, and definitely no authentication built into this very simple screen. It was just a way of saying that if you can figure out how to connect to it, Salesforce will let the message go outside, right? It'll open up the door or the window to that website, but you had to figure out how to do the authentication. And so we would do something like this. Let's go ahead and find like a sample web service tests. There's like a bunch of these out there. But there should be like a sample.js, or actually, if we want to be really kind of silly, let's just do google.com. So this is a web page, right? And technically, we can whitelist a web page. So let's just say google.com, right? And so now what we're doing here is we're basically saying, I want to let Salesforce talk to google.com. That's all. And so if we come here and we do something like this. So this is some Apex. And what this Apex is saying is, here's a web page, a URL. And then we're saying, go ahead and do an HTTP request. And an HTTP request is calling to another website saying, hi, I'd like to either get something or I'd like to give you something. The give is called a post. Let me just go ahead and put string body here. And normally we would save this in an Apex class. We would not just execute this like this. But let's go ahead. I think this will work. I'm going to hit execute. Set endpoint. Helps if I spell it right. Okay. And I did not get an error. We didn't get a nasty error. And what we're actually getting on here is Google's webpage. So you can see here it says search the world and Google, et cetera, et cetera. The reason it works is because I've said Salesforce is allowed to talk to Google. Now, if I come here and I take this away and I change it with something else, like not Google, right? When I come back here and I try to execute it again, we should get a nasty error. Or not. You know what? I think I already have Google whitelisted elsewhere because we have a bunch of name credentials. So let's do that slightly differently. Let's pick another website, and I'm not trying to pick on Bing, but here you can see it's saying basically you didn't let me talk to Bing yet. Salesforce says you have not let me do this, and I'm not going to let you talk to Bing because you have not gone into setup, gone to somewhere in the setup, and specifically listed this web page or this website. So we're not allowed to talk to Bing. And so remote site settings was the way that we used to do it a long, long time ago. But it's not very good because it only has like this one field that just says, well, list your domain, right? And that's that. So now this one's going to work. There we go. See, so that's what remote site settings is. I'm going to delete this remote site setting because we stopped using remote site settings a while ago.
Okay.
And we started using named credentials instead. And named credentials were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing when it first came out. Because the old named credentials, which I can still do, create a new legacy one, it actually includes authentication. So I didn't have to write my own code to connect to the website and log in. It would include authentication. You can see here, there's different authentication protocols available. It's a two-step process for the old one. So the old one was, first you'd have to create this concept of an auth provider. So we're going to tell Salesforce, I want to connect to another website, and that other website uses valid authentication mechanisms that are considered standards in the world. And you can see this is a long list. This list actually has gotten a lot longer over the years. When it first came out, it was a lot shorter. Oh, you don't see it, do you?
I think we don't see the list that you're seeing.
I don't think you see the list.
No.
Well, I will show you a couple of them, and that way you won't have to worry about why you're not able to see my pick list values the way I'm showing my screen. But Apple is one, and so if you wanted to connect to a website that's using Apple's authentication mechanism, you could. DocuSign auth provider is another. Facebook, GitHub, Google, Janrain, LinkedIn, and I'm just going to click through. I'm not going to have to read them all to you. But basically all very popular websites that are out there. And then some open standards like OpenID Connect, as well as Salesforce, Slack, and Twitter. And so what this feature, this auth provider / name credential feature gave us was the ability to not have to write code to do the authentication, which used to be a big pain to have to write code to authenticate, because each one's a little different, things change over time. And so Salesforce said they'll take care of this for us. And so we can come here and we can choose one of these, and I'm going to choose Google for today's example, and we're going to say Google demo. And what you do is you put in some information from the website that you're logging into, and to get that information, you have to go to that website and set up some stuff. And so typically, what there is like a set of secret strings, secret information that the other website gives you. And then of course, like the URLs of that other website. And then Salesforce will handle the code to log in each time that you're going to call that website. And so that's what the auth provider functionality is. Now, we still use auth providers today, but named credentials have changed a lot. And so I'll go ahead and create a sample legacy named credential, and then we can go ahead and create a new one as well. So one thing to note is that the consumer key and consumer secret that you set up, you really want to be careful when you set those up. You don't want to just like give them away or show them on a video, let's say. Hint, hint. So we're going to do that today. We'll go ahead and actually do it, but we'll delete it by the time this video is published, and so people won't be able to use it. But it's important that if you are going to set up some type of integration, that you are very careful not to expose your key and secret or client ID, whatever they call it on the different websites that you're working with, to the public world, because then someone would be able to log in as you to that website. So this is something that you got to be careful on. So I'm going to go ahead. We're just going to go through the motions. I'm just going to put test and test for now, and then we'll come back and we'll do it for real. So the auth provider provides some information that often you then have to take this URL and give it to the website and say, okay, website, this is a URL that I'm allowed to log in from, and we'll actually go through it. But this is the auth provider. So this was step one. And then let's go back to the named credentials, and we'll do a legacy named credential. And we'll call this Google Demo Legacy. And we'll put in the website, www.googleapis.com. And here's where we can say, do I want each person to log in as themselves? Or do I want me as an admin to authenticate once and everyone gets to use my authentication, which is also kind of risky. So something to consider what's appropriate depending on what you're building. And then here you can see the different types of authentication protocols that are available. And so I'm going to choose.
Hello?
Sorry about that. I'm going to choose OAuth 2.0. And we are going to select that authentication provider. Now, you're not seeing it on my screen right now. Not sure what just happened, but that's okay. So I'm choosing my authentication provider. And what I'm saying is I want this named credential to work with this authentication provider that I just set up. And then there's other stuff on here like scopes that we can put in, and I will. And then we would hit save, and it would actually start the login process. So I'm going to just save this just so we have a placeholder for now. Okay. But what you'll notice is this is still a fairly simple screen. We don't have a lot of stuff on here. We do have the ability to control who can use this. And so if we go to a profile, let's say, or a permission set, let's go to a permission set. And we'll choose one of our permission sets. Let's just choose this one here, which is not the right one, but that's okay because we're not going to keep it. And we go to named credentials. You can see here named credential access actually shows up. And we could select that named credential, although it's not showing up right now. But yeah, so you could control it that way. And so you could have at least some level of control. But the new name credentials actually have a lot more control. Okay, so what I want to do is use a legacy named credential to connect to the Google API. And we'll do Google Drive for today. So again, it's a two-part process. Let's go back to our authentication provider first. The first part is filling in this important stuff here. So I have my Google Cloud console open already. And I'm starting to create a client ID, an OAuth client ID. And I'm going to say this is a web application. And let's just call this the demo client. And this is the URL that we're going to be starting from, which we can get from Salesforce. So if we come back here, we should be starting from, I think, this URL at the top. Let me actually cancel out of that real quick and just see. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so I'm going to paste that in here. And then down here, whoops, say that one more time. Down here, we have to say the URL that is specified here in our callback URL. This is a technical thing. Basically, behind the scenes, the servers talk to each other, and they want to make sure that they're talking to the right place. And so they want you to say ahead of time when you're setting this up, who they're allowed to talk to. That's what that is there. Okay. Now on the right-hand side here, we're going to see the client ID and client secret. Again, these are things that we're going to delete by the time this video is published, so they will not be valid. And you do not, under any circumstances, want to share your client ID and your client secret with anybody else in the world. So we're going to come here and just fill in the client ID, which is the consumer key, and the client secret, which is the consumer secret. And I'm going to leave these URLs as is because Salesforce has been very kind to talk to Google ahead of time about how to do this. So if you were connecting with a website that you set up or something that isn't as large of a company, then you may need to change those URLs. But we should be good. Okay. And you can actually do some cool stuff here. So if I go to test only initialization URL and I copy that and paste it here, you can actually see that, whoa, it's taking me to Google. But what's crazy is this was a Salesforce website, right? Mm-hmm. And so Salesforce is starting this initialization process to say, oh, wait, I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to talk to Google. Let me go talk to Google and make sure that Matt knows what he's doing and that he wants to, Salesforce to talk to Google on his behalf. That's essentially what this is here. And so those are those URLs. Okay. Now we're going to go to our named credentials again. And we'll go to that same one that we set up before, which was the Google demo legacy. And I'm just going to do some editing here. And so we have Google demo. Now I need to put some scopes in here. So what is a scope? A scope is basically saying when we go through this process of saying, hey, Matt, do you want to let Google be talked to by Salesforce? Google wants to know, what are the things that Salesforce is allowed to talk about? And they'll present it on the screen saying, well, what about this? What about that? There's a bunch of things, that we could talk to them about. And let's see if I can find it. What I want to do is actually call this very simple method called get on an about. And Google actually provides a little explorer here that we can play with to see, how does this work, right? If we were to make this call from Salesforce or any other environment, what is it actually doing? So I can actually test this out first. So I'm going to hit execute. I'm going through the auth flow here where it's saying, are you sure you want to do this? And this is all the things that I'm giving access to Google's Explorer tool. So I feel pretty comfortable doing it. Oh, I'm sorry, you did not see the screen. 1 second while we solve that. I'm not sure if this will work, but let's just try it out. So it's a consent screen. Here we go. That looks like this. I'm going to go ahead and click allow on the original consent screen, and we'll come back to here. And apparently it didn't work. Let's try it one more time. I'm just going to refresh and do it a little faster because I think I waited. Okay, that time it worked. Oh, it still didn't work. Huh. Well, Google's tool may not be working today. Let's see if we can find another one that maybe works. How about list? Maybe this one here will work. Let's see. Okay, this one worked. Okay. Let's go back to about and see if we can get that one to work. It was saying field needs to be included or something. The fields parameter is required for this method. Okay. Here, let's try first. Let's try name. Let's try that. Name is not a field. Okay. Maybe we can read the instructions and actually see what we're supposed to do here. So fields, we could try user maybe. Let's try user. So can also try asterisk. Sometimes that works. Oh, look at that. It worked. Okay, great. Good to know. And actually what I might do is just make this bigger. There we go. So what we did is we sent a message to this web page, this server called googleapis.com/drive/v3/about, passing in a parameter called fields equals user. And then the key is the authentication piece that, they're not going to show us here, but there's this access token, there's this key, and then a header as well. And we did a get, which means we're asking for information. And then we get this beautiful response saying, oh yeah, here's some all sorts of information about Matt, because I'm logged in as me. And we want to do this from Salesforce. So this is going to be our endpoint. Now let's see if we can figure out where we were. Okay, so we were here, Google demo scope. That's where we were. Okay, so if we come back to here and we look here, it says authorization scopes requires one of the following. So I'm going to go and take this scope. And again, this is just telling Google that Matt is going to allow Salesforce to talk to Google about this particular topic or one of these topics here. In fact, I'll do read only just to make it a little safer. And so we're going to put scope in there. And when I hit save, it's going to do this auth flow where it says, hey, Matt, are you sure you want to do this? And I say, yes, I want to do this. I want to let Salesforce talk to Google. Let's go back one more time. I just solved this problem the other day too, so I should be able to figure this one out. Auth to Google demo pending. Well, this is a great time for someone to leave the answer in the comments. We're not live streaming, so that might not work. Let me come back here and go to Google demo, and if I have to, I'll open up. I just literally just did this the other day, so I should be able to do it again. We could put it in decent scopes. Let me pull up another tab real quick, and I will see what I did the other day, and hopefully we can figure this one out. 1 second. I know this is correct. This one I'm not so sure about. And this is really the hard part about integrations most of the time. It's getting that initial connectivity. Once you have that set up, it's actually not that bad the rest of the way. All right, 1 second. Interesting. So I don't even see this checkbox for this PKCE. This is something new, I think. I'm going to try unchecking that one, and we'll see what happens. And I'm going to also go back to named credential and see what happens there. Oh, you know what it could be? I think I might know what it is, actually. I still have to say that I'm allowed to use this, which I don't think I've done yet. But let's try it one more time and see. No. So let's check my profile real quick. Oop. That might be it. And while I'm doing that, I'm also going to try to look at some other stuff on the other screen. So we'll go to profile. Yeah. This might be it. Let's see if we can get this to load. And let's go to named credentials. Nope, different one. So it's not showing up there as being even available, which is interesting. Well, we might just jump to the new one then, because the new one I know works.
Before I forget,
Yeah.
so just to clarify, those like API scopes that you got from Google, where it was like read only, etc.
Yeah.
Those go into Salesforce, and then Salesforce looks at that URL, and in that URL is what Google's going to allow authorization to access. And so if it's missing one of those, either you won't have access, or Google will say, hey, you're not showing me the right authorization level, so I can't show you that information.
Yeah, so it's all part of this initial setup, this handshake of saying, here's what we want to allow this integration to do. And so on the we have these keys. So we're getting Google's keys and putting them in Salesforce, and then we're taking Salesforce's URL and putting them in Google, which is what we did here. See, and so that's the first level. Just saying, hey everybody. We're friends. Salesforce meet Google, Google meet Salesforce. That's the first step. Then, because there's a lot in the Google API, we also have these scopes, which is basically saying, okay, when Salesforce talks to Google, what are the things that we're going to be allowed to talk about? And so those are what the scopes define. And you can have a long list of scopes. And so when I, as a Google user, say I want to allow Salesforce to talk to you, it lists all the scopes saying, well, do you want Salesforce to know about all this stuff? And if I say yes, now Salesforce can ask about all that stuff.
Okay.
Can do all that functionality. And so that's what the scopes are. Yeah, so I'm just trying to figure out why this is not working. At this point, I'm dealing more with the new named credentials than the legacy ones. So maybe we should just do that. Maybe we should just switch to the new ones. Okay. So new named credentials actually consist of two parts. We have an external credential, and then the named credentials that are listed kind of on them. And so here I am. I'm defining the first kind of half of it, where I'm saying it's going to be called Google Demo. We'll call it Google Demo External Credential, just to distinguish what we were doing before. And we still connect it to the auth provider. So that part's the same. So the nice thing is, if you've already set up a named credential, the legacy kind, you don't have to totally start from scratch. There we go. And so now we have this external credential. And then what we do is we create named credentials that are connected to the external credential. And essentially what this structure allows us to have, now that we have like a one-to-many setup, is that we can create multiple named credentials that all are kind of housed within this external credential record. And then it continues actually when we get to who can use it and stuff like that, we can do it even more. So I'm going to call this Google Demo Named Credential. Let's just call it Google Demo New for now. And then we'll say it is googleapis.com. Choosing our external credential, and you can do some other stuff here. Okay, that all looks good. You can actually limit it to certain packages too if you want, so you can control that as well, which is nice. Okay, so we have a name credential. Now you can see this has very similar fields to the original or the legacy name credentials, but then down here we have this extra stuff, which is different. And if we come back to the external credential, we also have this thing called principals. And so this is where we can say parameter name, let's just call this admin user, and identity type. This is what we saw before. Remember, named user versus per user. I'm going to say named, and we can add the scope there also. I don't think we necessarily need to. Let's go ahead and add it. And then we can authenticate here. So let's go ahead and authenticate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to authenticate this particular principal for this particular name credential on this external credential. But we can have multiple name credentials and multiple principals all on the same name credential and external credential. So it's like a database of connectivity, whereas it used to be separate records for each one. Okay, so let's see if this one works. So far, so good. And so far, not so good. Okay. I'm sure I'm skipping over something very simple, and that's why it's not obvious. And somebody is going to call in and figure it out. Let me real quick just try changing some of this stuff as well. Let's do that. And it's got to be something like that. Let me also just check my profile. So we'll go back there, make sure that I'm allowed to use it. Or we could do a permission set. That would work too. In fact, maybe I'll do that. Oh, we're already at profiles. No, I'll still do it as a permission set. And I might even have one. Oh, okay, let's just do, let's do this one here, sure. This is a sandbox, I'm not too worried. But here we can see name credential access and external credential principal access. So I'm going to come here and edit. And here is our demo one that we just created. So now this is saying that this particular permission set gives users the ability to use this particular principal for the name credential or external credential. And let me go ahead and add an assignment, and I'll add it to myself. There we go. Okay. So one more time, we're coming back to name credentials. And we're going to this Google demo named credential, and this is the new one. And I'm going to come down here to, oh, I got to go to the external credential, sorry. I'm going to come down here and we're going to hit authenticate. Hopefully it works this time. Oh my gosh. Token error, missing ID token. All right, well. OpenID. Okay, so let's just add an additional scope. That's what this is basically saying. This is actually the same issue I must have encountered the other day because I remember this. So we're going to come here and let's edit this name credential. This one here. And we're going to add OpenID as the scope. And I'm going to do it down here as well. But you can see we could have different scopes for different purposes. And so maybe, Chris, when you use this, you have one set of scopes. And when I use it, I have a totally different set of scopes, which would be a great way to kind of reduce the amount of work to build an integration and just control the functionality. Oh, look at that, it worked.
Nice.
Control the functionality using point and click functionality inside Salesforce instead of having to do it with code and stuff. Okay, so what did we just do? So we now have a named credential, And that name credential is called Google Demo New. And we can come back to our developer console and call this name credential, call this URL. And so Google Demo New is the name of the credential, and it corresponds to the URL. We want to come back here and see what it was that we were actually calling. So it was this right there, and we're going to actually add that fields equals user probably too, I think, to it. Just like that. No body, and let's hit execute and cross our fingers. There we go. And we actually got the same results. I don't know if you can see it. It's kind of small.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's just, for demonstration's sake, undo a little of what we did to see what would happen if I didn't give access to Matt to do this, or it was Chris trying to do it and he didn't have access to it. So what we're going to do is come back here to our permission sets. And this is what typically happens is we test it as an admin and then another user tries to do it and it doesn't work, right? So if we were to take this permission set away from me, and I'll go ahead and do that, and then I try again. Oh, see, I'm not allowed to do it.
Okay.
So this is how we can now control who can do what. And it's, like I said, it's a much more complex model than the old way. But with that complexity, we get a lot of new functionality, especially on the security side of things. And so you can see here what we have the name credentials, we have the external credentials, we have the user external credential, which is essentially the junction, and then permission sets as well. Plus, there's still the auth record too. So there's a lot more involved to do an integration than the old days, but we can have granular control, which means we don't have to worry as much. And again, if we are setting up like a super user that can connect to Google or some other website on our behalf, you want to be really careful who can do it and what they're able to do with it. And so this allows you to kind of restrict it to just the right people, just the right scopes.
And when you talk about who can do it and what they can do with it, is that limited to them building something to run on top of the integration and get data they shouldn't have? Or is it like if you've built a Lightning Web component that has an integration to an external system, but they don't have the right permissions, even if they click the button because you've accidentally added it to their page layout, it won't work, essentially.
Right. So we configured one principal record here, and actually I unfortunately named it admin, right? This is really, it should be edit. So what I'm going to do is kind of walk through the motions if I can figure out where I am. Let's say this is actually the non-read only, right? That's what that there is. And so I'm going to come here and I'm going to change this to that. And then I'm going to create another one, and we'll call this read only. And we'll say it's a name principal. So even though it's going to be me authenticating for both, we can have two versions of it.
Okay.
One that is read only, I'll get there eventually, and one that's not. Too many tabs open. Okay, and so if I have two of these and I've authenticated both, I can share the admin one with Matt on a permission set and say Matt's allowed to interact with this. I could share the read only with everybody else. So, but the name in our code is still the same. And so what that means is that when you run this code, whether it's from a Lightning Web Component or something else, you're going to have a different behavior than when I run it. And so it's set at the server side, right? So when it's received, so there's nothing I can do in Salesforce to kind of bypass it. The only things I could do would be to somehow change what's been shared with me at this level, or go to your computer or log in as you, right? Which of course at that point, we can't stop it. But that's really why this new model is in place. It's because it allows us to have that level of granular control, but the best of both worlds, making it easier on developers. The alternative in the past was we would actually build two integrations, right? We'd have to set up two named credentials and share them differently and all that kind of stuff. And now we don't have to. We can have one integration, one super user, but the scopes can be limited based on what we want to share to. And because we're sharing with permission sets, it's the same type of permission set that we would do for anything else. And so if we go back to permission sets, one of the things that I often do with permission sets, you can see here, account edit, applications read, assignment create. So you can create a permission set called read only for Google Drive and another one for edit for Google Drive. And then you can use permission set groups or just assign them to the users. And so it's basically a way to kind of extend that same concept, but to integrations, things that happen outside of Salesforce, not just things that are inside Salesforce. So it doesn't matter if you write a great Lightning Web component that knows who I am and can figure out, hey, don't let me do this or not anymore. At this point, it's okay. You don't have to worry about it. Your Lightning Web component will be secure because we've only given access to the people that are supposed to have access.
Very cool.
Yeah. Well, we got it working.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
And like, it definitely seems like it's another avenue for managing access and permissions, and theoretically does seem simpler. Because I feel like one of the things that I've run into as a less experienced admin is there are moments where it feels like there are 14 different screens in Salesforce that are related to managing permissions and permission sets and permission set groups and assignments. And I've read the documentation. I think I've checked every box I need to check, and it's still not working. And then it turns out there's a screen I had never seen before that is even more permissions. And so this, like, my first reaction was, oh no, another screen of permissions. But this does seem like I know that if I do it all over here, then I don't have to worry about any of those screens in Salesforce because I've
right. And I think that's really something that I'm avid on. I like that we can kind of decouple the work that our developers do from the work that admins do. And so now we're able to have developers build an integration, but admins control some of the finer details about who can use it and how they use it. Which is really important because in the old days, it was always like, oh no, we need a change. We have to go back to the developer. And, so it slows things down. It's a whole process and it requires a lot more testing. But by enabling admins to have more control over things that used to be in the developer's wheelhouse, we're able to kind of make those changes faster, test them faster, get them into production faster. Of course, we still follow governance and procedures and stuff, but it's a lot scarier to have to change lines of code, right? It could break a lot more, even on accident, versus making changes with point and click.
Yeah. And then is the named credentials setup part, is that kind of like a standard part of if I go to the App Exchange and I get an app that's going to do a integration between some platform and my Salesforce org, is part of the setup of that usually like, and then here's how to set up named credentials, or is that part of the package that you download from the App Exchange?
It depends. Okay. So some packages include their named credentials, some don't. There's not a right or a wrong, right? I always get a little nervous when a package includes named credentials because I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, like, where's my data going? What are you sending? What are you sending to the server that isn't my server? Yeah. So personally, I prefer where they make you do extra steps to get that connectivity going. At the same time, for someone who's less technical, having to do it, that's hard. We just did it, and I was making mistakes. And I'm pretty technical, and just did this the other day.
Yeah.
So. You can imagine someone who has not done it recently or ever, it's going to be a lot scarier. They're going to be nervous. So there's pros and cons to both approaches. It just kind of depends on the publisher, what they want to do.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you for showing that today.
Oh, no, I'm happy to do so. I hope that we help somebody feel better about the new name credentials. And if we don't edit this video too heavily, I hope that error that we got around answers somebody else's question, because I'm sure other people are hitting that error too.
Yeah, I think I will need to like pause that error when we're rendering this video and put the full error in the description so that if somebody searches
Right.
for that error, they can find the video and then throw in a
Yes.
timestamp that says,
Watch this long video to
yeah,
find out that you just need to put the word OpenID in your scope.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it is like, I feel like this is very helpful to sort of demystify what goes into an integration because for non-technical folks, it definitely does feel like magic to be like, yeah, and then this software should talk to that software, but I have no idea how I would make that happen. But this is like, yeah, they,
Honestly, for technical folks, it seems like magic too. It's not this is not one of those things that like only developers understand. I don't think anyone really gets it. Like you can understand it, of course, and once you've built it and worked with it, you get it. But it's just one of these non-visual things. It
yeah,
happens. The servers talk to each other, and so we don't get to see it happening. And so it is hard to build integrations. It's very hard to debug integrations. So yeah, I wouldn't say this is like a non-technical thing. I would say this is an everybody thing.
awesome,
Yeah.
cool. Well, thank you once again, Matt, for hopping on one of these Wednesday calls. Thank you, folks, for watching. Do please be sure to like and subscribe. If you have ideas for additional content you'd like us to see put together, please drop those in the comments as well. And we will see you in about a week.
Awesome.
Thanks
Thanks.
again.